Sophia Martinez never imagined that a simple swipe on a dating app would lead to her being sold like merchandise on the dark web. At 24 years old, she was just a receptionist at a dental office in Phoenix, Arizona, dreaming of love and a better future. 72 hours after saying, "I do," to a man she believed was a successful CEO, Sophia found herself locked in a concrete room, her hands zip-tied, while strangers on the internet bid on her life. This is the story of how a whirlwind romance became a nightmare of human trafficking, and how one mother's relentless determination exposed an international criminal network that had destroyed dozens of lives. Sophia Martinez woke up every morning at 6:30 in her small apartment at 1523 Sunrise Boulevard, Unit 14B, in Phoenix, Arizona. Her routine was simple and predictable. She made coffee in her tiny kitchen, showered while listening to morning radio, and dressed in the professional attire expected at the dental office where she worked. The apartment was modest but clean, decorated with photographs of her family and motivational quotes she had printed and framed herself. By 7:45, she was out the door, driving her aging Honda Civic to 2847 Maple Grove Avenue, where Dr. Patterson's dental practice occupied the ground floor of a modern medical building. Sophia had worked there for 3 years as a receptionist, greeting patients with her warm smile, managing appointments, and handling insurance paperwork. The job was stable but unexciting, paying just enough to cover rent, car payments, and student loans from her associate degree in business administration. She was good at her work, pleasant with patients, efficient with scheduling, but she knew this was not her final destination in life. Sophia dreamed of something more, something bigger than answering phones and filing dental charts. Her closest friend at work was Natalie Chen, a dental hygienist who was 2 years older and infinitely more confident about dating and relationships. Natalie had been married for 3 years to her college sweetheart and loved playing matchmaker for Sophia. During lunch breaks in the small staff room, Natalie would scroll through dating apps on Sophia's phone, offering advice on profile pictures and first message strategies. Sophia was cautiously optimistic about online dating, though her recent experiences had been disappointing. Most matches led to boring conversations that fizzled after a few days, or first dates with men who seemed more interested in talking about themselves than getting to know her. Her last serious relationship had been with Ryan Cooper, a boyfriend from college who had moved to California for a job opportunity 3 years ago. They had tried long distance for 6 months before acknowledging the obvious, that neither of them was willing to relocate, and the relationship had died a slow, painful death through increasingly infrequent phone calls and mounting resentment. Since then, Sophia had dated sporadically, but had not found anyone who made her feel the spark she was looking for. That combination of attraction, respect, and genuine connection. Sophia's family was the center of her world. Her mother, Carmen Martinez, lived 20 minutes away in a small house at 4021 Desert Rose Lane. Carmen was 52 years old, a housekeeper at a hotel near the airport, and the strongest woman Sophia had ever known. She had raised Sophia and her younger brother Diego as a single mother after their father left when Sophia was 8 years old. Carmen worked 2 jobs for most of Sophia's childhood, sacrificing everything to make sure her children had what they needed. Sophia called her mother at least 3 times a week and visited for dinner every Sunday, a tradition they maintained religiously. Diego Martinez was 21, studying computer science at Arizona State University while working part-time at a computer repair shop. He was brilliant with technology, shy with people, and protective of his older sister. The 3 of them were close in a way that came from surviving difficult times together, from learning to depend on each other when the world felt unstable. Outside of work and family, Sophia tried to maintain hobbies that enriched her life. She attended yoga classes twice a week at a studio near her apartment, finding peace in the structured movements and forced mindfulness. She belonged to a book club that met monthly at a local coffee shop, where she had made a few casual friends who shared her love of mystery novels and psychological thrillers. Every other Saturday, She volunteered at the Maricopa County Animal Shelter, walking dogs and socializing cats, work that made her feel useful and connected to something beyond her daily routine. She dreamed constantly about starting her own business someday, an event planning company that would organize weddings, corporate events, and parties. She had notebooks filled with ideas, business plans sketched in the margins, color schemes and decoration concepts drawn during slow days at the dental office. But starting a business required capital, connections, and confidence, three things Sophia felt she lacked. So the dreams remained dreams, pleasant fantasies she indulged in when reality felt too constraining. March 2023 arrived with the oppressive heat that Phoenix residents knew too well. Sophia had been single for 8 months, long enough that her mother had started making pointed comments about grandchildren, and Natalie had begun setting her up on blind dates with her husband's co-workers. Sophia resisted the pressure, but acknowledged privately that she was lonely. She missed having someone to call at the end of a long day, someone who asked how her morning went and actually cared about the answer. She missed the small intimacies of a relationship, cooking dinner together, watching movies on the couch, sharing inside jokes that no one else understood. One evening after work, sitting alone in her apartment with takeout Chinese food, Sophia downloaded an exclusive dating app that Natalie had recommended. The app was called Elite Match, and it marketed itself as connecting professionals seeking serious relationships. The membership fee was higher than other apps, which theoretically filtered out people who were not serious about finding a partner. Sophia spent an hour creating her profile, selecting photos that showed her smiling at her brother's birthday party, volunteering at the animal shelter, and dressed up for a friend's wedding. She wrote a bio that was honest but optimistic, describing her career goals, her love of books and yoga, her close family relationships. She set her preferences for men between 30 and 40 years old, within 50 miles of Phoenix, looking for serious relationships. The matches came slowly at first. Sophia swiped through profiles during her lunch break, exchanging brief messages with a few men who seemed potentially interesting. Most conversations died quickly, the usual pattern of bland small talk that never progressed to actual chemistry. Then, on a Thursday evening in mid-March, a profile appeared that made Sophia pause. The man's name was Alexander Westbrook. He was 38 years old, with dark hair graying slightly at the temples, blue eyes that looked kind in his photographs, and a smile that seemed genuine rather than practiced. His profile described him as the CEO of an international tech consulting firm based in Seattle, specializing in cybersecurity for Fortune 500 companies. His photos showed him in professional settings, wearing expensive suits, standing in front of modern office buildings with glass facades. There were also travel photos, Alexander on a beach in Thailand, hiking in the Swiss Alps, touring ancient ruins in Greece. His bio mentioned that he was temporarily in Phoenix overseeing a business expansion, that he valued intelligence and kindness in a partner, and that he was looking for someone who could understand the demands of executive life while maintaining her own independence and ambitions. Sophia stared at the profile for several minutes, feeling that familiar mixture of excitement and skepticism. This man seemed too good to be true. Successful, well-traveled, handsome, articulate. Men like this probably had hundreds of matches. Women far more sophisticated and accomplished than a dental office receptionist from Phoenix. She almost swiped past without matching, assuming rejection before it could happen. But something made her hesitate. Maybe his profile mentioned that he valued kindness, or maybe it was just loneliness and hope, and she swiped right, indicating interest. She set her phone down and tried to focus on the television show she was watching, telling herself not to expect anything. The notification came less than 5 minutes later. Alexander Westbrook had matched with her. A message appeared almost immediately. His opening line was not the generic "hey" or pickup line she had grown accustomed to, but a thoughtful question. He had noticed in her profile that she volunteered at an animal shelter and asked what had inspired her to do that work. Sophia felt a genuine smile spread across her face as she typed her response, explaining how she had always loved animals but could not afford pets in her small apartment. So volunteering was her way of connecting with dogs and cats who needed attention. The conversation flowed naturally from there. Alexander was attentive, asking follow-up questions that showed he was actually reading her responses rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. He asked about her favorite books, her family, her dreams for the future. When she mentioned wanting to start an event planning business, he did not dismiss it as unrealistic, but asked intelligent questions about her business model and target market. He shared details about his own life, describing how he had built his consulting firm from the ground up over 15 years, the challenges of managing employees across multiple time zones, the loneliness that came with constant travel and high-pressure work. He mentioned that he was divorced with no children, that his marriage had ended 5 years ago because his ex-wife could not handle the demands of his career. He was careful to say this without bitterness, acknowledging that it took a special kind of person to be in a relationship with someone whose work required constant attention and flexibility. They messaged back and forth for 2 hours that first night, the conversation ranging from serious topics to playful banter. And when Sophia finally said goodnight, she felt more optimistic about dating than she had in months. Over the next 3 days, Alexander continued to message regularly. His texts arrived at different times throughout the day, brief notes during his work meetings, longer messages in the evening when he said he was relaxing in his hotel room. He told her he was staying at the Phoenician resort while overseeing his company's expansion into the Phoenix market, that he had meetings with potential clients downtown, but found time to explore the city when he could. On Sunday afternoon, he asked if she would be interested in meeting for dinner that evening. Sophia's stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. She wanted to say yes immediately, but forced herself to think rationally. She told him she would need to check her schedule, giving herself time to discuss it with Natalie the next day at work. Natalie was enthusiastic when Sophia showed her Alexander's profile the following morning. The photos looked legitimate. His messages were thoughtful and mature, and most importantly, he had not sent any inappropriate content or made her uncomfortable. Natalie advised Sophia to meet him in a public place, tell someone where she was going, and trust her instincts if anything felt wrong. Sophia agreed and messaged Alexander that evening, accepting his dinner invitation for the following Saturday. Alexander suggested a restaurant called Celestial Heights in Scottsdale, an upscale establishment that Sophia had heard of but never visited because of the prices. He offered to pick her up, but she politely declined, saying she preferred to drive herself to first dates. He responded graciously, saying he understood and appreciated her caution, that he would meet her at the restaurant at 7 o'clock. Sophia spent the days leading up to the date in a state of nervous anticipation. She told her mother about Alexander during their Sunday dinner, describing him as a businessman she had met online who seemed genuinely nice. Carmen was cautiously supportive, reminding Sophia to be careful and keep her phone charged in case of emergency. Diego offered to track her phone location during the date, a suggestion Sophia initially laughed at, but then accepted, grateful for her brother's protective instincts. Saturday evening arrived with Sophia changing outfits 3 times before settling on a navy blue dress that was elegant without being too formal. She arrived at Celestial Heights 15 minutes early and waited in her car, watching for Alexander. At exactly 7 o'clock, a black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. A man stepped out, and Sophia recognized Alexander immediately from his photos. He was tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, with the same dark hair and kind eyes she had studied online. He wore a charcoal gray suit that fit perfectly, expensive leather shoes, and a watch that glinted gold in the setting sun. He looked around the parking lot, presumably searching for her, and Sophia took a deep breath before stepping out of her car. When he saw her, his face lit up with a genuine smile that made her nervousness ease slightly. He walked toward her with confident strides and greeted her with a warm handshake and a compliment on her dress that felt sincere rather than forced. They walked into the restaurant together, where Alexander had apparently made a reservation because the hostess greeted him by name and led them immediately to a corner table with soft lighting and a view of the city lights. Dinner was everything Sophia had hoped a first date could be. Alexander was charming without being arrogant, attentive without being overbearing. He asked questions about her life and listened to the answers with genuine interest. When she mentioned her mother's sacrifices and her brother's academic achievements, he responded with respect and understanding, sharing that he had also grown up in a working-class family and understood the pressure to succeed. He talked about his business in terms that were impressive but not boastful, explaining that his company provided cybersecurity consulting to major corporations, helping them protect sensitive data from increasingly sophisticated attacks. He mentioned recent projects with companies Sophia recognized, Fortune 500 names that suggested legitimate success. When the bill arrived, Alexander insisted on paying despite Sophia's polite offer to split it. He said he had invited her and it was his pleasure to treat her to dinner. As they walked back to the parking lot, he asked if she would be interested in seeing him again. Sophia, feeling genuinely excited about this man, said yes, without hesitation. Their second date was even more impressive. Alexander took her to an art gallery opening in downtown Phoenix, an event he said he had been invited to through business connections. The gallery was filled with sophisticated people, contemporary art that Sophia did not fully understand, and servers offering champagne and expensive appetizers. Alexander moved through the crowd with easy confidence, introducing Sophia to several people as his date, making her feel included and valued. At one point, a well-dressed man approached them and greeted Alexander warmly, thanking him for his company's work on a recent security project. The interaction seemed to confirm Alexander's credentials, that he was indeed the successful businessman he claimed to be. After the gallery, they walked through the downtown streets, talking about art and life and dreams, and when Alexander kissed her goodnight at her car, Sophia felt dizzy with the possibility that she had found something real. The third date cemented Sophia's belief that Alexander Westbrook was special. He arranged a helicopter tour of the Grand Canyon, an experience Sophia had always wanted but never imagined she could afford. They flew over the massive geological formation as the sun set, painting the rocks in shades of orange and red, and Alexander held her hand as she pressed her face against the helicopter window, completely overwhelmed by the beauty. He took photos of her smiling against the backdrop of the canyon, images that made Sophia feel like someone from a different life, someone adventurous and romantic, rather than the practical receptionist she saw in the mirror each morning. During the flight back to Phoenix, Alexander talked about his vision for the future, how he wanted to expand his business while also making time for personal relationships, how he believed success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. His words resonated with Sophia, who had always felt torn between ambition and her desire for family and connection. By early April, Sophia and Alexander were seeing each other multiple times a week. He would finish his business meetings and come to her apartment in the evening, bringing dinner from expensive restaurants or cooking simple meals in her tiny kitchen. He met Natalie during a lunch visit to the dental office, charming her with his polite questions about her work and his obvious affection for Sophia. He sent flowers to Sophia's workplace with notes that made her co-workers sigh with envy. He bought her a designer handbag she had admired in a store window, insisting it was his pleasure to give her nice things. Sophia felt like she was living in a dream, the kind of romance she had only seen in movies. Her mother remained cautiously pleased during their Sunday dinners, when Sophia gushed about Alexander's generosity and attentiveness. Carmen asked basic questions about his background, his family, his divorce, and seemed satisfied with the answers even if she noted that the relationship was moving very quickly. Diego was less enthusiastic, saying something about Alexander felt too polished, too perfect, but Sophia dismissed his concerns as brotherly overprotectiveness. In late April, Alexander introduced Sophia to a man he described as his business partner. They met for dinner at an upscale steakhouse, where Alexander arrived with a tall, athletic man in his early 40s. The man introduced himself as Marcus Brennan, explaining that he handled the financial side of Alexander's company, while Alexander focused on client relationships and technical operations. Carmen asked basic questions about his background, his family, his divorce, and seemed satisfied with the answers even if she noted that the relationship was moving very quickly. Diego was less enthusiastic, saying something about Alexander felt too polished, too perfect, but Sophia dismissed his concerns as brotherly overprotectiveness. In late April, Alexander introduced Sophia to a man he described as his business partner. They met for dinner at an upscale steakhouse where Alexander arrived with a tall, athletic man in his early 40s. The man introduced himself as Marcus Brennan, explaining that he handled the financial side of Alexander's company, while Alexander focused on client relationships and technical operations. Marcus was friendly in a different way than Alexander, more reserved and analytical, but he spoke knowledgeably about the company's expansion plans and mentioned specific deals that corroborated Alexander's stories. He asked Sophia polite questions about her work and interests, making her feel like she was being evaluated, but in a way that suggested Alexander valued his partner's opinion. By the end of dinner, Marcus gave what seemed like his approval, telling Alexander privately, but within Sophia's hearing, that she seemed like a keeper. The interaction made Sophia feel more secure in the relationship, that Alexander's life and business were legitimate, and his interest in her was serious. As May arrived, Alexander began talking more seriously about the future. He mentioned that his time in Phoenix was coming to an end, that he would need to return to Seattle to oversee other aspects of his business, but he did not want their relationship to end. He suggested they could make long-distance work for a while, with him flying to Phoenix regularly and her visiting Seattle when possible. But then he proposed a different idea that made Sophia's heart race. What if she moved to Seattle with him? He could help her find a job. Or better yet, she could work for his company in some administrative capacity while building her event planning business on the side. Seattle had a thriving corporate culture that needed event planning services, he explained, and with his connections, he could help her get established quickly. Sophia was simultaneously thrilled and terrified by the prospect. Moving to a new city was a huge step, leaving her family and friends, but it also represented the adventure and change she had always craved. Sophia discussed the idea with Natalie, who was torn between excitement for her friend and concern about the speed of the relationship. They had only known each other for 6 weeks, Natalie pointed out, and moving across the country for a man you barely knew was risky. But Sophia countered that sometimes you had to take risks for love, that opportunities like this did not come often, and she would regret it forever if she let fear stop her from pursuing something that felt right. Her mother was more direct in her concerns during their next Sunday dinner. Carmen asked pointed questions about Alexander's background, whether Sophia had met his family, whether she had verified his business credentials, whether she felt truly comfortable upending her entire life for someone she had known for such a short time. Sophia became defensive, accusing her mother of being negative and not wanting her to be happy. Carmen backed off but made Sophia promise to be careful and to always keep her family informed of her plans. Diego was openly skeptical, saying he had researched Alexander online and found surprisingly little information for someone claiming to be a CEO of an international company. Sophia dismissed this as evidence that Alexander valued privacy, that successful people did not plaster their lives all over social media. On May 28, 2023, Alexander took Sophia to Pinnacle Peak Resort for what he said would be a special dinner. They sat on the outdoor patio overlooking the desert landscape as the sun set. And after dessert, Alexander reached across the table and took Sophia's hands in his. He told her that the past 2 months had been the happiest of his life, that she had brought light and joy to his usually solitary existence, that he could not imagine a future without her. Then he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket and opened it to reveal a sparkling diamond ring. He asked her to marry him, promising to love her and support her dreams and make her happy for the rest of their lives. Sophia, completely overwhelmed by emotion, said yes without hesitation. Alexander slipped the ring on her finger, kissed her deeply, and said they should start planning their wedding immediately. Sophia called her mother from the restaurant bathroom, crying with happiness and excitement. Carmen's congratulations sounded warm, but Sophia detected underlying worry in her mother's voice. She called Natalie next, who screamed with joy and demanded to see photos of the ring immediately. The next morning, Sophia woke in her apartment with the ring on her finger and a mixture of elation and disbelief. She had just agreed to marry a man she had known for 2 months, something her rational mind knew was impulsive and risky, but her heart felt certain it was right. When Alexander called her that afternoon, however, he presented new information that accelerated the timeline even further. He explained that his business was facing an urgent opportunity in Singapore, a massive contract with a multinational corporation that required his immediate attention and presence. The negotiations would take at least 2 months, possibly longer, and he needed to leave within the next 10 days. He suggested they get married before he left, a simple ceremony with just the 2 of them, so she could legally join him in Seattle when he returned, and they could have a larger celebration later for family and friends. Sophia's excitement faltered at the rushed timeline. She had imagined at least a few months to plan, to prepare, to help her family adjust to the idea. But Alexander explained gently that his work often required immediate decisions and flexibility, that being married to him would mean adapting to an unpredictable schedule, that if she needed more time they could postpone, but it would mean months apart while he was traveling. Sophia struggled with the decision for 3 days, discussing it endlessly with Natalie, who thought the rush was concerning but understood the career pressures Alexander faced. She talked with her mother, who became increasingly direct in her reservations. Carmen said the situation felt wrong, that any man truly committed to Sophia would wait for a proper wedding, that this urgency suggested either extreme self-centeredness or something more troubling. But Sophia, caught up in the romance and afraid of losing Alexander, interpreted her mother's concerns as fear of change rather than legitimate warning signs. On June 2nd, she told Alexander she would marry him before he left for Singapore. He responded with joy and immediately began making arrangements. He suggested Las Vegas for the ceremony, explaining it was faster and simpler than dealing with Arizona marriage license requirements and waiting periods. He would handle all the details, booking the chapel, arranging for witnesses, reserving a hotel suite for their brief wedding night before he had to fly out the next morning. All Sophia needed to do was pack a small bag and prepare to become Mrs. Alexander Westbrook. On June 15th, Alexander called Sophia with genuine urgency in his voice. The Singapore deal had moved faster than expected, he explained, and he needed to leave in 72 hours. If they were going to get married before he left, they needed to do it within the next 2 days. Sophia felt panic rising in her chest. 2 days was barely enough time to process what was happening, let alone inform her family properly or prepare emotionally. Alexander must have sensed her hesitation because his voice became soft and persuasive. He told her he understood this was fast, that he knew it was asking a lot, but he loved her and wanted to start their life together immediately. He promised they would have a proper celebration when he returned, a reception where her family could attend, and they could share their happiness with everyone. But right now, he needed to know she was committed to him and their future together. Sophia, feeling the pressure of losing him combined with her genuine feelings, agreed. She would marry Alexander Westbrook in Las Vegas in 2 days. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity and emotion. Sophia requested time off from work, telling her supervisor she had a family emergency that required travel. She shopped for a simple white wedding dress, finding one at a department store that fit reasonably well without alterations. She packed a small suitcase with clothes for a few days, assuming she would return to Phoenix after the wedding to properly prepare for her move to Seattle. She told her mother about the wedding during an awkward phone call where Carmen's silence spoke louder than any words could. Her mother finally said she was disappointed Sophia was making such a huge decision so quickly and without family present. But if Sophia was certain this was what she wanted, Carmen would support her even if she could not attend. Diego was more vocal in his disapproval, calling the situation crazy and demanding that Sophia slow down and think rationally. But Sophia, defensive and emotional, accused her family of not wanting her to be happy and said they would understand once they met Alexander properly and saw how good he was to her. On June 17, 2023, Alexander picked up Sophia from her apartment in his black Mercedes at 8 in the morning. He loaded her small suitcase in the trunk and kissed her gently, telling her how beautiful she looked even in casual traveling clothes. The drive to Las Vegas took approximately 5 hours, during which Alexander was attentive and affectionate, holding her hand when he was not shifting gears, playing music she liked on the car stereo, stopping for lunch at a nice restaurant in Kingman. They talked about their future, about the apartment they would share in Seattle, about trips they would take together, about the life they were building. Sophia felt her doubts melting away in the warmth of his attention, convincing herself that this was right, that true love sometimes required courage and faith. They arrived in Las Vegas around 2 in the afternoon and checked into the Bellagio Hotel, where Alexander had reserved a suite on the 28th floor. The room was luxurious beyond anything Sophia had experienced, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Strip, a king-sized bed with expensive linens, a bathroom with a deep soaking tub and marble surfaces. Alexander gave her time to rest and prepare for the ceremony, which was scheduled for 6 o'clock that evening. Sophia showered and changed into her white dress, applied makeup with trembling hands, and tried to call her mother one more time to share this moment. Carmen did not answer, which hurt, but Sophia rationalized that her mother was probably at work and would call back when she could. At 5:30, Alexander knocked on the bedroom door looking impossibly handsome in a tailored navy suit. He told her she looked like an angel, took her hand, and led her downstairs to the waiting car. The Chapel of Eternal Vows was exactly what Sophia expected from a Las Vegas wedding venue, small and slightly tacky, but trying for elegance with white flowers and soft lighting. They were greeted by Reverend Thomas Calloway, a pleasant man in his 60s who welcomed them warmly and congratulated them on their union. Alexander introduced the 2 witnesses he had arranged, Marcus Brennan, his business partner whom Sophia had met at dinner weeks earlier, and Marcus's girlfriend Irina Volkov, a striking Russian woman with long dark hair who smiled but said little. Sophia felt a twinge of disappointment that she had no one on her side of this ceremony, no family or friends to witness this important moment. But she pushed the feeling aside, reminding herself this was just the legal formality, and they would have a real celebration later. The ceremony itself took less than 15 minutes. Reverend Calloway led them through traditional vows. Alexander slipped a simple gold band on Sophia's finger to match the engagement ring, and they were pronounced husband and wife. Sophia signed the marriage license with slightly shaking hands, officially becoming Sophia Westbrook. Alexander kissed her deeply as Marcus and Irina applauded politely. They returned to the Bellagio for what should have been a romantic wedding night. Alexander had arranged for champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries to be delivered to the suite, and they toasted to their future before he led her to the bedroom. But around midnight, as Sophia was falling asleep in her husband's arms, Alexander's phone rang with what he said was an urgent call from his Singapore contacts. He took the call in the living area of the suite, speaking in low tones for almost an hour. When he returned to bed, he seemed distracted and troubled. In the morning, he explained that the Singapore situation had become more complicated and he needed to leave immediately, flying out that afternoon rather than the next day as originally planned. He suggested Sophia return to Phoenix, pack up her belongings properly, and wait for him to send the moving company and plane tickets to Seattle as they had discussed. He promised it would only be a few days before she joined him, a week at most, and then they would start their real life together. Sophia tried to hide her disappointment but did not protest, not wanting to seem clingy or demanding on the first day of their marriage. Alexander drove her to the Las Vegas airport and dropped her at the terminal, kissing her goodbye and promising to call as soon as he landed in Singapore. She watched his Mercedes pull away and felt an inexplicable sadness wash over her, a feeling she attributed to the emotional intensity of the past few days and the letdown of their separation. The flight back to Phoenix was short and uneventful, and by 3 p.m. on June 18th, Sophia was back in her apartment at 1523 Sunrise Boulevard, staring at the simple gold band on her finger and trying to process that she was now married to Alexander Westbrook. She called her mother and left a voicemail explaining that the wedding had happened and she was back in Phoenix temporarily, but would be moving to Seattle soon. She texted Natalie with wedding photos and promised to share all the details at work the next day. Then she collapsed on her couch, exhausted and strangely unsettled, and fell asleep in her wedding dress. The morning of June 19th brought a knock on Sophia's apartment door at 11 o'clock. She had called in sick to work, still feeling drained from the emotional roller coaster of the wedding and separation, and was wearing pajamas while drinking coffee and scrolling through social media. The knock was firm and professional, not the casual rap of a friend or neighbor. Sophia looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in polo shirts that read, "Premier Executive Relocations," standing in the hallway. She opened the door with the chain still attached and asked through the gap how she could help them. The taller man, who had an Eastern European accent, explained that they were from the moving company Mr. Westbrook had hired to pack and transport her belongings to Seattle. He showed her a work order with Alexander's name, her name, and the apartment address. All correct. Sophia felt a wave of relief mixed with surprise. Alexander had said it would be a few days before the movers came, but perhaps he was just being efficient. She unlatched the chain and let the men inside. They introduced themselves as Viktor Sokolov and Dmitry Kozlov, explaining they would need several hours to properly pack all her belongings for the long-distance move. They had brought boxes and packing materials and would handle everything professionally. Sophia asked if she should help, but Victor said their company policy was to do all the work while clients supervised to ensure nothing was damaged or forgotten. This sounded reasonable, even thoughtful. So Sophia sat on her couch and watched as they began systematically going through her apartment. They worked efficiently, wrapping dishes in paper, folding clothes into boxes, disassembling furniture. After about an hour, Dmitry asked if she needed to use the bathroom before they started packing that room. Sophia said yes and excused herself. When she emerged 10 minutes later, both men were standing in her living room with most of her belongings already boxed and stacked near the door. Victor explained they had loaded her furniture in the truck downstairs and just needed to take the remaining boxes. Then he said something that made Sophia pause. "Mr. Westbrook has arranged temporary corporate housing for you in Seattle while your permanent residence is being prepared," Victor said in his thick accent. We will drive you there directly after loading your belongings. It is a long drive, approximately 22 hours, but we have a comfortable vehicle and can make the trip in 2 days with an overnight stop. Sophia's mind raced. Alexander had not mentioned anything about her traveling with the movers. He had said he would send plane tickets. She pulled out her phone to call Alexander and clarify, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried texting him. Victor watched her with what might have been impatience. "Mr. Westbrook said you might have questions," he continued. "He is on his plane to Singapore now with no cell service, but he sent this email to me to show you." Victor pulled out a phone and showed Sophia an email that appeared to be from Alexander's business address. The email explained that due to the urgency of the Singapore trip and some complications with his Seattle property, he had arranged for Sophia to stay at corporate housing temporarily, and he thought it would be faster and easier for her to drive with the movers rather than coordinate separate flights and furniture delivery. The explanation sounded plausible enough, though Sophia felt uneasy about the change in plans. She tried calling Alexander again with the same result, straight to voicemail. Dmitri suggested helpfully that Mr. Westbrook's international flight would be in the air for many hours, and she would not be able to reach him until he landed. Victor added that they were on a tight schedule and needed to begin driving immediately to reach the halfway point by nightfall. Sophia made a quick decision based on what seemed like logic. Alexander had definitely hired these movers. They had the correct information about her and the apartment, and she had just married this man 2 days ago and needed to trust that he was making arrangements in her best interest. She told the men she would grab a quick bag with essentials for the drive and they could leave in 15 minutes. She packed toiletries, a change of clothes, her laptop, and some snacks, then followed Victor and Dmitri down to their vehicle. In the parking lot sat a white cargo van with Premier Executive Relocations printed in blue letters on the side. The printing looked professional enough, though Sophia would later realize it was just magnetic decals that could be removed in seconds. Victor opened the passenger door and gestured for Sophia to get in the front seat. Dmitri loaded her essential bag in the back with the furniture boxes. The van was clean but basic, no luxury features, just a commercial vehicle designed for hauling cargo. As they pulled out of the apartment complex parking lot, Sophia sent a text message to her mother explaining that she was heading to Seattle with the movers and would call when she arrived. Carmen's response came quickly, asking why Sophia was driving instead of flying and requesting that she share her location and stay in constant contact. Sophia felt annoyed by her mother's continued worry, but agreed to check in regularly. The drive began normally enough. They headed north out of Phoenix on Interstate 17, and Victor made small talk about the moving business and how many relocations they handled for executives. Sophia asked questions about their company and how they knew Alexander. Victor explained that Premier Executive Relocations specialized in serving high-level business clients who needed discreet, efficient service. Dmitri, who was driving, said little but nodded occasionally at Victor's comments. After about an hour, Sophia noticed they had exited the interstate and were on a smaller highway heading west rather than continuing north towards Seattle. She asked why they were not staying on the main interstate route. Victor explained calmly that they needed to pick up additional packing supplies from their Arizona warehouse before making the long drive, standard procedure. The warehouse was about an hour west, he said, and then they would get back on the proper route. This sounded strange to Sophia. Why would they need more supplies when her entire apartment had already been packed? She pulled out her phone to check the route on GPS and realized they were heading into increasingly remote desert areas away from major cities. Victor noticed her checking the phone. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Westbrook?" he asked with a tone that now sounded less friendly than before. Sophia forced herself to stay calm. She said she just wanted to make sure they were on schedule. Victor exchanged a glance with Dmitri. something passing between them that Sophia could not interpret, but that made her stomach tighten with anxiety. She tried to call Alexander again. The call would not connect at all this time, the signal apparently too weak in this remote area. She attempted to open a map application on her phone, but before she could, Victor casually reached over and took the phone from her hands. His grip was firm and left no room for resistance. "You will not need this right now," he said in a voice that had lost all pretense of friendliness. "We are almost at the warehouse." Sophia felt real fear beginning to bloom in her chest. These men were not moving company employees. This was not a drive to Seattle. She had made a terrible mistake trusting them, trusting Alexander, trusting any of this. She looked at Dmitri, who was now smiling slightly, his eyes focused on the road ahead as they drove deeper into the desert, on a route that Sophia knew was taking her not to a new life, but to something much darker. After another 30 minutes, the van turned off the paved highway onto a dirt road that kicked up clouds of dust. Sophia saw an abandoned industrial complex in the distance, old warehouses with broken windows and faded paint, the kind of place that clearly had not seen legitimate business activity in years. Her terror was now complete and overwhelming. This was where they were taking her, and whatever was about to happen would not be good. She tried the van door handle, but it was locked with some kind of child safety mechanism she could not override from the inside. Victor noticed her attempt and laughed, a sound without humor. "No one can help you out here, Mrs. Westbrook," he said, emphasizing her new married name with mockery. "Your husband has sold you to our organization, and you now belong to us until we find a buyer willing to pay the right price." The words were so shocking, so impossible to process, that Sophia initially thought she had misheard. Sold. Buyer. What was he talking about? Victor pulled a cloth from his pocket and held it towards Sophia's face. She tried to turn away, but Dmitri grabbed her from behind with one arm while keeping his other hand on the steering wheel. The cloth covered her mouth and nose, and she smelled something sharp and chemical that made her head spin. She tried not to breathe, but her lungs demanded air, and she inhaled the chloroform fumes. Within seconds, her vision dimmed and her body went limp. Her last conscious thought was of her mother, of Carmen's worried face asking her to be careful, and of how right her mother had been about everything. Sophia's awareness returned gradually, accompanied by a throbbing headache and overwhelming nausea. She opened her eyes to complete darkness and panicked for a moment, thinking she had gone blind. Then she realized she was in a windowless room, the darkness so absolute it meant no light source at all. She tried to move and discovered her hands were bound behind her back with plastic zip ties that cut into her wrists. She was lying on a thin mattress on a concrete floor. The room smelled musty and chemical, like old industrial buildings Sophia had explored as a teenager. She tried to call out, but her throat was so dry that only a croak emerged. She heard movement somewhere beyond the walls, footsteps and muffled voices speaking a language she did not recognize. Sophia's mind raced through the implications of her situation. Victor had said Alexander had sold her. That could not be true. Alexander loved her. They were married. There had to be some mistake, some misunderstanding. Perhaps Victor and Dmitri were criminals who had somehow intercepted the legitimate movers. Perhaps Alexander was looking for her right now, coordinating with police to find his missing wife. The sound of a lock turning interrupted her desperate rationalizations. A door opened, admitting a rectangle of harsh fluorescent light that made Sophia squint after the complete darkness. A figure entered, backlit so Sophia could not see features clearly. The person flipped a switch, and a bare bulb illuminated the small concrete room. Sophia saw it was a man she recognized. Marcus Brennan, Alexander's supposed business partner, who had served as a witness at their wedding 2 days ago. He smiled at her, and there was something predatory in that smile that made Sophia's blood run cold. "Hello, Mrs. Westbrook," he said with false pleasantness. "I hope you are comfortable. We apologize for the rough transportation, but it was necessary to get you here efficiently." Sophia found her voice, though it came out weak and shaking. "Where is Alexander? What is happening? Why am I tied up?" Marcus pulled up a metal folding chair and sat down, studying her with the detached interest of someone examining merchandise. "Alexander," he said thoughtfully. "You mean Roman Petrov? That is his real name, though he has used many names over the years. Alexander Westbrook was just his current identity for targeting women like you." The words made no sense to Sophia's confused mind. Roman Petrov. Targeting women. Marcus must have seen her incomprehension because he continued in a tone that was almost conversational, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Roman Petrov is a professional romance scammer and human trafficker," Marcus said calmly. "He has been operating for 6 years, creating fake identities on dating apps and seducing vulnerable women into quick marriages. The marriage serves 2 purposes. First, it creates legal complications that delay missing persons investigations. Second, it provides psychological leverage over victims who feel shame about their impulsive decisions and are less likely to immediately report themselves as missing. You, Mrs. Westbrook, are Roman's 27th victim." Sophia felt like she was in a nightmare that would not end. This could not be real. Alexander had been so kind, so attentive, so loving. The expensive dates, the thoughtful conversations, the marriage proposal. None of it had been real. All of it was manipulation designed to trap her. Marcus continued talking, either not noticing or not caring about Sophia's distress. "Roman spent 2 months building trust with you, studying your psychology through your social media and conversations, identifying exactly what you wanted from a relationship and becoming that person. He spent approximately $40,000 of trafficking proceeds on wining and dining you, an investment that will generate significant returns now that we have you in our possession." Sophia forced herself to ask the question she was terrified to hear answered. "What are you going to do with me?" Marcus smiled that predatory smile again. "We have listed you on a dark web auction site called Dark Market," he explained. "Your listing went live immediately after your wedding, advertising a 24-year-old American bride with no criminal record and a college education. The bidding started at $50,000 and is currently at $78,000 with 12 active bidders. The auction closes tomorrow night, June 20th at 11 p.m. The winning bidder will provide instructions for delivery, probably international transport to their location, and will take possession of you for whatever purposes they choose. Some buyers want domestic workers, some want sex slaves, some want wives they can control completely. We do not ask questions about buyer intentions. That is not our business." The horror of what Marcus was describing could not be fully processed by Sophia's mind. She was being auctioned on the internet like an object, like furniture or a used car, except she was a human being with a family who loved her and a life she wanted to live. She started crying, unable to stop the tears, even though she sensed that showing weakness to this man was dangerous. "Please," she whispered, "please let me go. I will not tell anyone about this. I will say I ran away. My family has some money, not much, but they will pay a ransom. Please just let me call my mother." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Your family has no significant money based on our research," he said. "Your mother works as a hotel housekeeper. Your brother is a college student. You yourself are a receptionist making $35,000 per year. There is no ransom to be paid. As for letting you go, that is not possible. You now know too much about our operation, and releasing you would put us all in prison. The only way you leave here is when your buyer comes to collect you in 2 days." He stood up and walked toward the door, apparently finished with the conversation. Two women were pushed into the room before Marcus left, and Sophia saw through her tears that they were both young, both terrified, both clearly in the same situation. The door slammed shut and the lock turned, leaving the three women in the dim light of the single bulb. One of the women, a petite blonde who could not have been older than 22, moved toward Sophia and gently touched her shoulder. "Hey," she said softly. "I am Olivia. This is Rachel. We are trapped here too. I am going to help you with those zip ties. Your hands must be hurting." Olivia pulled a small piece of sharp plastic she had managed to hide in her clothing and carefully sawed through Sophia's restraints. The relief when her hands came free was physical, blood rushing back into her fingers with painful tingles. Sophia rubbed her wrists and tried to compose herself enough to understand what was happening. "How long have you been here?" she asked Olivia. 3 weeks, Olivia replied, her young face drawn and exhausted. "I was dating a guy named Jason Sterling, or at least that is what he called himself. Same story as yours, I guess. Quick romance, fast marriage in Las Vegas, and then I ended up here." Rachel, a slightly older woman with Asian features and an expression of resigned despair, added her own story. 2 months for me," she said quietly. "My guy was David Morrison, successful venture capitalist who was going to help me launch my tech startup. We got married in Reno, and I woke up in this place the next day." "Both of you married these men?" Sophia asked, trying to understand the pattern. Both women nodded. Rachel explained that the marriage was crucial to their operation's success. It created a legal paper trail that suggested the women had left voluntarily with their new husbands, which delayed police investigations and made families think the missing woman was just starting a new life somewhere. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, the women had already been sold and transported to buyers who made them disappear permanently. Sophia felt sick understanding how carefully this had all been planned. "What happened to the women who were here before us?" Sophia asked, dreading the answer. Olivia and Rachel exchanged glances. "Some were sold to buyers in the United States," Rachel said slowly. "We heard they are still alive, working as domestic servants or in worse situations. Others were sold internationally, Mexico, Eastern Europe, Middle East. We have no idea what happened to them after they left here. One girl tried to escape 2 months ago before I arrived." Olivia's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They caught her before she got far. We heard her screaming for 3 days. Then she was just gone." The message was clear. Escape attempts led to consequences worse than compliance. The three women spent hours sharing their stories, finding grim comfort in their shared nightmare. They were being held in a warehouse at 14500 Industrial Park Drive in Casa Grande, Arizona, approximately an hour south of Phoenix, in a remote industrial area with few neighbors. The complex had at least 6 buildings, but they were confined to this one room in the basement of the central warehouse. Guards checked on them 3 times daily, bringing basic food and escorting them one at a time to a bathroom down the hall. The guards were always armed. The doors were solid metal with electronic locks that could not be picked. The room had no windows. Escape seemed impossible. Marcus Brennan appeared to be in charge of the daily operations, though he reported to someone higher up whose identity the women did not know. Victor and Dmitri were muscle and transportation, handling the physical aspects of kidnapping and moving victims. A woman named Irina Volkov, the same one who had been at Sophia's wedding, served as a guard and prevented escape attempts with what Olivia described as enthusiastic cruelty. She seemed to enjoy the power she had over the imprisoned women, taunting them about their buyers and making graphic descriptions of what might happen to them. The operation was sophisticated and well-funded, with multiple fake identities, legitimate-seeming business fronts, and apparently years of successful operations. Roman Petrov was the primary hunter, creating romantic connections and marriages. but there were at least 3 other men working similar operations in other states. This was not just a single criminal, but an organized network that had perfected the process of trafficking women through romance scams. The evening of June 19th, Marcus entered their room again and addressed Sophia specifically. "Your auction is proceeding well," he said with satisfaction. "Current bid is $85,000. You are proving quite popular with our clients. One bidder in particular keeps raising his offer. He seems very determined to own you." Sophia refused to respond or look at Marcus, keeping her eyes fixed on the concrete floor. He continued talking anyway. "Tomorrow night your fate will be decided, and by June 21st you will be on your way to your new owner. I suggest you use this time to accept your reality and prepare yourself mentally for whatever comes next. Resistance will only make things harder for you." After he left, Sophia broke down completely, sobbing with a combination of fear and rage and disbelief. This could not be her life. 5 days ago, she had been a normal receptionist in Phoenix, going to work and yoga classes and living an ordinary existence. Now she was chained in a basement waiting to be sold to a stranger who would use her for purposes she could not bear to imagine. Olivia and Rachel held her while she cried, offering what comfort they could, but there was nothing they could say that would make this situation less horrifying. That night, as the 3 women huddled together for warmth on the thin mattresses, Sophia thought about her mother. Carmen would be desperately worried by now, having not heard from Sophia since the brief text about leaving with the movers. Her mother would call the police, would demand action, would refuse to accept vague explanations. Diego would use his computer skills to try tracking her phone and researching Alexander Westbrook. Natalie would provide information about the relationship and the rushed marriage. But would any of that be enough to find her in time? The auction ended in less than 24 hours, even if police were looking for her, even if they suspected foul play. Could they possibly locate this remote warehouse and raid it before she was transported to her buyer? Sophia tried to pray, though she was not particularly religious, asking whatever higher power might exist to help her mother find her, to save her from this nightmare, to give her one more chance at the life she had taken for granted. The night stretched endlessly, punctuated by the sounds of Rachel and Olivia's restless sleep and the distant voices of guards somewhere in the building above them. June 20th, 2023, dawned with no change in their situation, except the growing dread as the hours ticked toward the auction's end at 11 p.m. Marcus brought them breakfast, instant oatmeal and water, and announced cheerfully that bidding had reached $92,000. He showed Sophia a screenshot from the auction website on his phone, though the details were encrypted and she could not see buyer identities. The listing described her as a recent bride, educated, attractive, healthy, with no family members likely to pursue aggressive investigation. The description was clinical and dehumanizing, reducing her entire existence to selling points for potential buyers. Throughout the day, the women tried to maintain some sense of normalcy by sharing more about their lives before this nightmare. Olivia talked about her parents in Portland, who had been searching desperately for her since her disappearance 3 weeks ago. She had spoken to her mother once in the first few days here, forced to say she had run off with Jason and was happy. "Please do not worry." The memory of lying to her mother still made Olivia cry. Rachel described her younger sister Grace, who must be frantic with worry, knowing Rachel would never just disappear without contact. At 3 in the afternoon, Victor entered and told them to clean themselves up, because potential buyers sometimes requested video calls to inspect merchandise before finalizing purchases. He provided basic toiletries and cheap makeup, treating them like property being prepared for sale. At 7 p.m., Marcus returned and announced that the auction had ended with a final bid of $95,000. The buyer, identified only as user 7743X through the encrypted dark web platform, had purchased Sophia. Payment in cryptocurrency had been confirmed. Arrangements for delivery were being made, with pickup scheduled for the following day, June 21st. Victor would transport Sophia to a private airstrip outside Tucson, where the buyer's representative would take possession of her. The destination was unknown, probably Mexico or Central America, based on the pickup location. Sophia would be given sedatives for the transport to make her compliant and prevent escape attempts. By June 22nd, she would be in her buyer's custody, her fate entirely in his hands. The reality of what Marcus was describing finally broke through Sophia's shock into a different kind of clarity. She was going to die, if not physically, then in every way that mattered. He, Sophia Martinez, who had grown up in Phoenix, who loved her family, who dreamed of starting a business, who believed in love and happy endings, that Sophia was about to be erased. In her place would be whatever her buyer decided to make of her, a slave, or a victim, or just a body to be used until it was no longer useful. She looked at Olivia and Rachel, seeing her own despair reflected in their faces. How many women before them had sat in this room waiting for buyers who never saw them as human? How many had been transported to unknown locations and forced into situations beyond imagining? And how many more would follow them if no one stopped this operation? Sophia made a decision in that moment of clarity. She would not go quietly or compliantly. She would fight and scream and do everything possible to delay or prevent the transfer. She would force these criminals to show their violence, to prove they were willing to hurt her, because causing problems might create opportunities for escape or rescue. Even if she failed, even if her resistance accomplished nothing, she needed to know she had fought rather than accepting this fate passively. She shared this decision with Olivia and Rachel, who looked terrified, but also showed a flicker of hope. If they all resisted together, if they made themselves difficult and drew attention, maybe someone would notice. Maybe one of the neighbors in this industrial complex would hear screams and call police. Maybe the universe would grant them the miracle they desperately needed. It was a slim hope, almost no hope at all, but it was something. They agreed that when the transport came tomorrow, they would fight with everything they had. While Sophia Martinez spent her first full night in captivity at the Casa Grande warehouse, her mother Carmen was beginning what would become a desperate crusade to find her daughter. The timeline of Carmen's increasingly frantic attempts to reach Sophia had started casually enough. June 18th, the day after Sophia's wedding, Carmen had called to check on her daughter's return from Las Vegas. The call went to voicemail, which was not unusual since Sophia was probably driving or resting after the emotional intensity of getting married. Carmen left a cheerful message congratulating her daughter again and asking her to call back when she had time. By evening, when Sophia still had not called, Carmen texted asking if everything was okay. The text showed as delivered, but not read. Carmen felt the first whisper of concern, but rationalized that Sophia was probably overwhelmed with packing and planning her move, too busy to call her mother right away. June 19th brought more concerning silence. Carmen called 3 times throughout the day, leaving increasingly worried voicemails. She texted Diego asking if he had heard from Sophia, and her son replied that he had not talked to his sister since before the wedding. Carmen called the dental office where Sophia worked and spoke to Natalie Chen, asking if Sophia had been at work. Natalie explained that Sophia had taken several days off for the wedding and move, but she did mention she would be driving to Seattle with movers. The word movers triggered alarm bells in Carmen's mind. Sophia had said she was driving to Seattle, but that seemed strange. Why would she drive such a long distance with movers instead of flying? Carmen tried to remember the last conversation she had with Sophia about the move plans, realizing with growing dread that Sophia had been vague about many details because the timeline had been so rushed. Carmen called Alexander Westbrook's number which Sophia had given her weeks ago. The number was no longer in service, showing a recorded message that the subscriber could not be reached. By the afternoon of June 19th, Carmen's concern had elevated to genuine panic. Something was deeply wrong. Sophia would not disappear like this, would not ignore multiple calls and texts from her mother, would not fail to check in during such a major life transition. Carmen called the Phoenix Police Department and asked to file a missing persons report. The operator connected her to a detective in the missing persons unit, Detective Lauren Fitzgerald, who asked Carmen to come to the station to provide formal information. At 4 p.m., Carmen sat in Detective Fitzgerald's small office explaining the situation. Her daughter had married a man named Alexander Westbrook after a 2-month courtship. They had a quick wedding in Las Vegas on June 17th. Sophia was supposed to be moving to Seattle with him, but had sent a text on June 19th saying she was driving there with movers. Now Carmen could not reach her daughter by phone, text, or through any friends. Alexander Westbrook's phone number was disconnected. Carmen feared something terrible had happened. Detective Fitzgerald listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions about Sophia's state of mind, her relationship with Alexander, any signs of domestic violence or coercion. Carmen insisted that Sophia had seemed happy, maybe moving too fast in the relationship, but genuinely excited about her future. Detective Fitzgerald explained gently that most missing persons cases involving adults resolved quickly, that many people needed time away from family during major life transitions, that Sophia might simply be overwhelmed with her new marriage and move, and would contact her mother soon. But Carmen pushed back firmly. She knew her daughter. Sophia would not do this voluntarily. Something was wrong, and every hour they waited made the situation more dangerous. Detective Fitzgerald, perhaps recognizing a mother's instinct or simply moved by Carmen's obvious distress, agreed to begin an investigation. She asked Carmen to provide everything she had: Alexander Westbrook's phone number and social media profiles, the name of the Las Vegas chapel where they married, any information about Alexander's alleged business, photographs of Sophia and Alexander together, text message conversations. Carmen rushed home to 4821 Desert Rose Lane and spent the evening compiling everything she could find. She printed text messages between Sophia and Alexander that Sophia had shown her. She saved screenshots from Alexander's dating profile before it had been deleted. She found the wedding photos Sophia had sent showing the small ceremony at Chapel of Eternal Vows. She wrote down everything Sophia had told her about Alexander's background, his company name, his Seattle address, his business partner Marcus. She called Natalie Chen again and asked her to write down everything she knew about the relationship from Sophia's perspective. By midnight on June 19th, Carmen had assembled a file of information and contacted Detective Fitzgerald to say she would bring everything to the station first thing in the morning. June 20th brought Carmen to the police station at 8 a.m. with her file folder clutched in shaking hands. Detective Fitzgerald reviewed the materials carefully, and Carmen could see the detective's expression changing from polite concern to serious attention. Fitzgerald asked to keep all the documents and photographs, promising to begin investigating immediately. She started with basic searches that revealed troubling inconsistencies. The Seattle address Alexander had given, 8900 Lake Washington Boulevard, was indeed a luxury apartment building, but the building management confirmed they had no current or past tenant named Alexander Westbrook. The tech consulting company Alexander claimed to own, Westbrook International Consulting, had no registration in Washington state business databases and no online presence beyond a basic website that appeared professionally designed but contained only generic information. The dating profile Alexander used had been deleted completely, though Carmen's screenshots preserved his photos and information. Detective Fitzgerald ran the photos through facial recognition databases, but found no matches. suggesting the person in the photos was using an identity that did not exist in any official records. The breakthrough came when Detective Fitzgerald contacted Chapel of Eternal Vows in Las Vegas and requested a copy of the marriage license for Sophia Martinez and Alexander Westbrook, filed on June 17, 2023. The chapel administrator located the record and faxed it to the Phoenix Police Department. When Detective Fitzgerald examined the marriage license, she discovered that the groom had not signed as Alexander Westbrook, but as Roman Petrov, with an address listed as 2190 Silver Mesa Court in Henderson, Nevada. This was the man's legal name, the identity he could not disguise on official documents. Fitzgerald immediately ran Roman Petrov through law enforcement databases and found an individual with multiple connections to fraud investigations, identity theft cases, and at least 2 suspected human trafficking operations that had never resulted in prosecution. Petrov had been questioned but never charged in the disappearance of 3 women over the past 4 years. Women who had married him under different assumed names and vanished shortly afterward. One of those women was eventually found in Mexico, another in Ukraine, both trafficked and traumatized. The 3rd woman was still missing. Detective Fitzgerald called Carmen immediately with the devastating news. "Your daughter did not marry a successful businessman," she said carefully. "She married a professional criminal who has been trafficking women for years through romance scams and fake marriages. We need to escalate this case immediately to the FBI because this involves interstate trafficking and possibly international organized crime." Carmen felt her world shatter completely. Her daughter, her sweet, trusting Sophia, had been deliberately targeted by a predator who specialized in exploiting women just like her. This was not a misunderstanding or a bad decision that Sophia could recover from. This was active human trafficking, and Sophia had been missing for more than 36 hours, time during which anything could have happened to her. Detective Fitzgerald assured Carmen that the FBI would prioritize the case, that they had resources and expertise that local police lacked, that finding Sophia was now the focus of a federal investigation. But Carmen knew with a mother's intuition that time was running out. Every hour Sophia was in these people's hands was an hour in which she could be transported further away, sold to buyers, or worse. June 22, 2023, brought FBI agent Michael Torres to the Phoenix Police Department to take command of the investigation into Sophia Martinez's disappearance. Torres was a veteran investigator with 15 years in the FBI, specializing in human trafficking and organized crime cases. He reviewed everything Detective Fitzgerald had compiled, listened to Carmen Martinez's testimony about her daughter, and immediately recognized the sophisticated methodology of the operation. This was not an isolated crime, but part of a larger network that had perfected the process of targeting, grooming, and trafficking women. Agent Torres assembled a task force that included Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's Cybercrimes Division, Agent Robert Hayes, who specialized in undercover operations, and Detective Fitzgerald as the Phoenix Police Liaison. Their first step was to build a complete profile of Roman Petrov and map his known associates, locations, and methods. Agent Chen began the digital forensics work, searching for Petrov's online presence and financial transactions. She discovered multiple dating profiles using different names but similar photos, all targeting women in major metropolitan areas across the southwestern United States. The profiles consistently portrayed wealthy businessmen, CEOs, venture capitalists, real estate developers, always successful and financially stable. Chen tracked the IP addresses used to create and access these profiles, finding a pattern that suggested Petrov used VPN services and encrypted communication to hide his location. But everyone makes mistakes eventually, and Chen found one dating profile that had briefly been accessed without VPN protection, revealing an IP address that traced to a location in Henderson, Nevada, consistent with the address on Sophia's marriage license. Agent Torres and Agent Hayes traveled to Henderson on June 22 to investigate the address at 2190 Silver Mesa Court. The location was a modest townhouse in a middle-class neighborhood, nothing like the luxury lifestyle Petrov portrayed to his victims. They knocked on the door with local police backup, but no one answered. The landlord confirmed that the property had been rented to Roman Petrov 6 months earlier, but he had not been seen there in weeks. With a federal warrant, agents searched the townhouse and discovered evidence that confirmed their worst fears. Multiple false identity documents, including driver's licenses and passports in the names Alexander Westbrook, Marcus Brennan, Jason Sterling, David Morrison, and others. Financial records showing cryptocurrency transactions totaling millions of dollars. A laptop computer that had been wiped clean, but which FBI cyber experts would later be able to partially recover. Most importantly, agents found a notebook with handwritten entries that appeared to be targeting notes on potential victims. The notebook contained names, ages, occupations, family situations, and psychological profiles of at least 40 women. Sofia Martinez was listed with detailed notes about her receptionist job, her close relationship with her mother, her brother in college, her dreams of starting a business, her recent breakup, even the fact that she volunteered at an animal shelter. Next to each woman's name was a status notation. Several were marked completed with dates and amounts in dollars that appeared to be sale prices. Others were marked in progress with target dates. Sofia's entry was marked completed 6/17/23, $95,000, delivery scheduled 6/21/23. The casual documentation of human trafficking, as if it were a business transaction, was chilling evidence of Petrov's methodical approach to destroying women's lives. Agent Torres immediately called his team with the information. The notation, delivery scheduled 6/21/23, meant they had less than 24 hours to locate Sofia before she was transported to a buyer. Agent Chen intensified her digital investigation, focusing on finding any electronic trail that could lead to Petrov's current location or his trafficking operation base. She discovered that Petrov had been using cryptocurrency to purchase goods and services, and while cryptocurrency was designed to be anonymous, careful analysis of blockchain transactions could sometimes reveal patterns. Wu Chen identified a series of payments from Petrov's cryptocurrency wallet to various vendors, payments for food delivery services, industrial rental properties, vehicle maintenance, and secure communication equipment. One payment in particular stood out: a monthly payment of $4,500 to a company called Apex Logistics LLC for property rental in Casa Grande, Arizona. Agent Chen researched Apex Logistics and discovered it was a shell company with no legitimate business activity, registered in Delaware with minimal public information. But property rental records were often publicly accessible through county tax databases. Chen searched Pinal County property records for any properties leased by Apex Logistics and found an industrial complex at 14500 Industrial Park Drive in Casa Grande. Satellite imagery showed 6 large warehouse buildings in a remote area south of Phoenix, surrounded by empty desert and with few neighboring businesses. This was exactly the type of location that a trafficking operation would use for holding victims, isolated enough to prevent escape, but close enough to major highways for efficient transportation. Agent Torres immediately requested surveillance on the Casa Grande location. By the afternoon of June 23rd, FBI agents had established observation posts using telephoto lenses and thermal imaging equipment. The thermal imaging revealed multiple heat signatures inside the central warehouse building, consistent with people being present in a basement or lower-level area. Vehicle surveillance noted 2 vans coming and going from the property, including one white cargo van with Premier Executive Relocations magnetic signs that matched the description Carmen Martinez had provided from Sofia's last text message. The evidence was now overwhelming. This was Petrov's trafficking operation headquarters, and Sophia was almost certainly being held inside along with potential other victims. Agent Torres coordinated with the FBI's tactical team to plan a raid on the warehouse. The operation needed to be precisely timed and executed because any warning to the traffickers could result in victims being harmed or transported quickly before rescue. They chose to raid in the early morning hours of June 25th, calculating that this was when guards would be least alert and when victims were most likely to still be on site before the scheduled delivery. The tactical plan involved simultaneous breach of multiple entry points to prevent anyone from escaping or destroying evidence. Medical teams and victim services specialists were on standby to provide immediate care for rescued women. Carmen Martinez and her son Diego waited at the FBI Phoenix office, praying for good news and dreading the moment when they might learn their worst fears had come true. At 4:30 a.m. on June 25, 2023, the FBI tactical team assembled in the pre-dawn darkness, approximately half a mile from the warehouse complex at 14500 Industrial Park Drive. 40 agents participated in the operation, including SWAT specialists, cybercrimes experts, medical personnel, and victim services advocates. The plan called for cutting power to the building to disable electronic locks while simultaneously breaching the front entrance, rear exit, and side-loading dock. Snipers were positioned to cover all exterior windows and prevent any attempts to flee. Local Casa Grande Police Department officers established a perimeter to catch anyone who managed to escape the building. Agent Torres gave the final briefing, and at precisely 5:02 a.m., the raid began. The power was cut, plunging the warehouse into darkness, except for emergency lighting that kicked on automatically. SWAT teams used battering rams and explosive charges to breach the locked metal doors, entering with flashlights mounted on their rifles. Agents flooded into the building shouting, "FBI, hands up, get on the ground." The front office area contained 2 men who were quickly subdued and handcuffed, later identified as Viktor Sokolov and Dmitry Kozlov. Both men were armed with handguns but surrendered without significant resistance when confronted by overwhelming tactical force. Agents swept through the warehouse methodically, clearing rooms and securing areas. They found Marcus Brennan in what appeared to be living quarters on the 2nd floor, sleeping when agents burst in. He attempted to grab a weapon but was tackled and restrained before he could fire. A woman named Irina Volkov was discovered attempting to flee through the rear exit, carrying a bag of cash and false documents. She was captured by agents positioned outside. The breakthrough came when agents located a stairwell descending to the basement level. At the bottom of the stairs was a heavy metal door with an electronic lock that had been disabled by the power cut. Agents opened the door and found a long hallway with several locked rooms. The first room contained Sophia Martinez, Olivia Thornton, and Rachel Kim huddled together on mattresses, terrified by the sounds of the raid, but alive and physically unharmed. When the FBI agents identified themselves and told the women they were being rescued, all 3 broke down crying with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Medical personnel rushed in to assess their condition, finding them malnourished and dehydrated, but without serious physical injuries. The psychological trauma would be profound and long-lasting, but they had survived. Sophia's first words after being told she was safe were asking for her mother, and when agents confirmed that Carmen Martinez was waiting at the FBI office, Sophia began sobbing with an intensity that spoke to the horror of believing she would never see her family again. While medical teams cared for the rescued women, FBI agents systematically documented everything in the warehouse as evidence. The office area contained computers with detailed records of the trafficking operation, spreadsheets listing victims by name with their biographical information and sale prices, email communications with dark web auction site administrators, cryptocurrency wallet information, showing millions of dollars in transactions over 3 years. Agents found files on 27 previous victims, confirming what the notebook in Henderson had suggested, that Sophia, Olivia, and Rachel were just the most recent in a long line of women trafficked through this operation. There were false identification documents for at least 8 different personas used by the traffickers, professional quality fake passports and driver's licenses that would be difficult to distinguish from legitimate documents without expert analysis. In Marcus Brennan's living quarters, agents found evidence of his role as financial manager for the operation. Bank account information for shell companies in 3 states, detailed accounting of expenses and profits, showing the operation generated approximately $2.7 million over 3 years. Contact information for international trafficking networks in Mexico, Eastern Europe, and Southeast Asia. Brennan's computer contained encrypted files that FBI cyber experts would spend weeks cracking. But the unencrypted material alone was damning enough to ensure conviction on multiple federal charges. The basement area where victims had been held contained additional evidence of previous captives, including personal items left behind by women who had been sold and transported months or years earlier. By 7:00 a.m., the warehouse had been completely secured, and all 4 arrested traffickers had been transported to FBI detention facilities. Sophia Martinez, Olivia Thornton, and Rachel Kim were taken to Banner University Medical Center, Phoenix, for comprehensive medical examinations and treatment. Carmen Martinez and Diego were brought to the hospital to reunite with Sophia in an emotional scene that left everyone present crying. Carmen held her daughter and kept repeating, "I knew something was wrong. I knew you would never leave without telling me. I never stopped looking for you." Sophia clung to her mother with desperate strength, unable to fully articulate the nightmare she had experienced, but feeling the safety of her mother's presence begin to ease the terror that had consumed her for 6 days. While the rescued victims received care and began the long process of recovery, FBI agents intensified their search for Roman Petrov. He was the architect of this trafficking operation, the manipulator who had seduced these women into trusting him, and he remained at large. During the initial interrogation of Marcus Brennan, the financial manager refused to cooperate and demanded a lawyer. But Viktor Sokolov and Dmitry Kozlov, who were lower-level operatives facing decades in prison, quickly realized that cooperation might reduce their sentences. Under questioning by Agent Torres, they revealed that Petrov had fled to Las Vegas immediately after Sophia's wedding and was staying at an apartment at 7840 Paradise Road, Unit 512. He had maintained this Las Vegas residence for years as a base for targeting victims and conducting weddings, knowing that Nevada's quick marriage license process was convenient for his operation. Agent Torres coordinated with the FBI Las Vegas field office to apprehend Petrov. On the afternoon of June 25th, federal agents conducted surveillance on the Paradise Road apartment and confirmed Petrov's presence through visual identification. At 4:00 p.m., agents executed a federal arrest warrant. When they knocked on the apartment door, identifying themselves as FBI, Petrov attempted to escape through a back window. He made it through the window but fell from the second-floor apartment, landing badly and fracturing his ankle. Agents apprehended him as he tried to crawl away despite the injury. Petrov was handcuffed, given medical treatment for his fractured ankle, and transported to FBI detention to await arraignment on federal trafficking charges. The search of Petrov's Las Vegas apartment revealed the full extent of his criminal enterprise. Agents found 6 fake passports in different names, allowing Petrov to travel internationally and assume various identities. There was $340,000 in cash, stored in a safe trafficking proceeds he kept readily available. Luxury items filled the apartment: expensive watches, designer clothes, high-end electronics, all purchased with money earned from selling women into slavery. Most importantly, agents seized Petrov's laptop computer, which contained encrypted files that would take FBI cyber experts weeks to fully decode, but which ultimately revealed the names and photos of all 27 victims. Communication logs with dark web marketplace administrators, detailed tutorials on romance scam methodology that Petrov had written for training other traffickers, and contact information for an international trafficking network spanning multiple continents. The laptop also contained evidence that shocked even experienced FBI agents. Petrov had meticulously documented his targeting and grooming of each victim, keeping detailed psychological profiles, notes on their vulnerabilities, transcripts of key conversations where he had manipulated them into trusting him, and even photographs he had secretly taken of victims without their knowledge during the relationships. For Sofia Martinez, Petrov had files showing he had researched her for 2 months before making initial contact on the dating app, studying her social media posts, identifying her recent breakup and her close family relationships, determining that she was looking for love and financial stability. The clinical nature of his predation was disturbing, showing that he viewed these women not as human beings, but as targets to be studied and exploited for maximum profit. The evidence against Roman Petrov was overwhelming and irrefutable. Forensic accountants traced cryptocurrency transactions proving he had received $2.7 million over 3 years from selling women. Digital forensics recovered communications showing he had coordinated with international trafficking organizations to transport victims. Most damaging were the testimonies of Sofia Martinez, Olivia Thornton, and Rachel Kim, who could provide first-hand accounts of his manipulation, false identity, and trafficking operation. In addition, FBI agents had located 18 of the 27 previous victims through the information in Petrov's files. Some were found in the United States, recovered from situations ranging from forced domestic work to sexual slavery. Others were located internationally through Interpol cooperation, including women in Mexico, Ukraine, Thailand, and Brazil. Each rescue was a small victory, though the trauma these women had endured could never be fully undone. Of the original 27 victims, 9 remained missing despite extensive investigation. Some were feared dead, killed by buyers or during transport. Others had potentially been sold to buyers who kept them in such isolated circumstances that locating them was nearly impossible despite international law enforcement cooperation. The families of these missing women were contacted by FBI victim services, given whatever information existed about their daughters' last known locations, and offered resources for continued searching. But the reality was grim. Women who disappeared into international trafficking networks often vanished permanently, their fates unknown even to law enforcement agencies with significant resources. By early July 2023, federal prosecutors had assembled charges against Roman Petrov and his 4 accomplices. The charges were staggering in scope: 27 counts of human trafficking, 1 for each victim, 27 counts of kidnapping, multiple counts of wire fraud related to the fake businesses and identities used in the operation, multiple counts of money laundering through cryptocurrency and shell companies, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, identity fraud for the fake passports and documents. The total potential prison time, if convicted on all counts, exceeded 400 years. The trial was scheduled to begin in October 2023 in the United States District Court for the District of Arizona, with the Honorable Judge Margaret Chen presiding. During the months between arrest and trial, Sofia Martinez began the difficult process of recovering from her trauma. She lived with her mother at 4821 Desert Rose Lane, unable to return to her own apartment because it held too many painful memories of the day she had been kidnapped. She attended intensive trauma therapy 3 times per week with Dr. Patricia Morrison, a psychologist specializing in trafficking survivors. The therapy sessions were exhausting and painful, forcing Sophia to confront the psychological manipulation she had experienced, her feelings of shame and self-blame, the nightmares that woke her screaming most nights. She was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and clinical depression. Medication helped manage the worst symptoms, but could not erase the fundamental ways in which her sense of safety and trust had been destroyed. Sophia found some comfort in connecting with Olivia Thornton and Rachel Kim, the two women who had shared her captivity and understood her trauma in ways no one else could. The three women formed a support group, meeting weekly to discuss their recovery, share coping strategies, and provide mutual encouragement during the darkest moments. They discovered through the FBI investigation that they had been specifically targeted for similar reasons. All women in their mid-20s, college-educated but working in jobs below their potential, with small immediate families, looking for serious relationships and financial stability. The traffickers had identified them as perfect victims, women who would trust romantic attention and would not be immediately missed if they disappeared. Carmen Martinez became a fierce advocate for her daughter and for trafficking awareness more broadly. She worked with the Arizona Human Trafficking Council to develop educational programs warning people about romance scams and manipulation tactics. She testified before the state legislature about the need for better laws to combat trafficking and support survivors. She appeared in media interviews sharing Sophia's story with permission, hoping that publicity would prevent other women from falling into similar traps. Diego Martinez, inspired by his sister's ordeal, changed his major from computer science to criminal justice, determined to pursue a career fighting human trafficking and internet crimes. The trial of Roman Petrov and his accomplices began on October 2, 2023, and immediately attracted national media attention. The case represented one of the most sophisticated romance scam trafficking operations ever prosecuted in federal court. Lead prosecutor assistant U.S. Attorney James Richardson presented overwhelming evidence over 3 weeks of testimony. Digital forensics experts explained how Petrov created fake identities and targeted vulnerable women. Financial experts traced millions of dollars in cryptocurrency payments. FBI agents testified about the warehouse raid and the condition in which victims were found. Most powerful were the victim testimonies. Sophia Martinez took the stand on October 18, 2023, and spent 4 hours describing her relationship with the man she knew as Alexander Westbrook, the wedding in Las Vegas, the kidnapping by fake movers, the 6 days of captivity believing she would be sold to a stranger, and the permanent psychological damage caused by the trauma. Sophia's testimony was devastating in its emotional honesty. She looked directly at Roman Petrov, sitting at the defense table, and confronted him with the reality of what he had done. "You made me believe you loved me," she said through tears. "You studied everything about my life and became exactly the person I needed. You convinced me to trust you and marry you, and 48 hours later you had me locked in a room waiting to be sold like furniture. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? To realize that someone you loved never existed, that you were just merchandise to be trafficked." Petrov showed no emotion during her testimony, maintaining a cold indifference that only highlighted his complete lack of empathy. The defense attorney, David Schwartz, attempted to argue that Petrov was merely a middle-level participant in a larger criminal organization, that he had been coerced by international crime syndicates into participating in trafficking operations. But the evidence contradicted this narrative. Petrov had been the mastermind, the recruiter, the romantic manipulator who made the entire operation possible. Olivia Thornton testified about her 3 weeks in captivity and her belief that she would never see her family again. Rachel Kim described the psychological torture of knowing she had been sold and wondering what kind of person had purchased her. 14 additional recovered victims testified via video conference from locations around the country and world, each telling similar stories of romantic manipulation, quick marriages, and sudden abduction. The cumulative effect of so many testimonies was overwhelming, painting a picture of systematic predation spanning years. Family members testified about the devastating impact on their lives, including Carmen Martinez's powerful victim impact statement describing how her daughter's trauma had permanently changed their entire family. Marcus Brennan, hoping to reduce his own sentence, testified against Petrov under a cooperation agreement. He provided detailed information about the operation's structure, Petrov's role as leader and primary recruiter, the targeting strategies used to identify vulnerable women, and the international connections that facilitated victim transport. Brennan's testimony confirmed that Petrov had personally designed and implemented every aspect of the trafficking operation, training other criminals in his methodologies and collecting the largest share of profits. The prosecution presented evidence that of the $2.7 million generated by the operation, Petrov had personally kept approximately $1.8 million while distributing the remainder among his accomplices and paying operational expenses. After 3 weeks of testimony and 12 hours of jury deliberation, the verdict came on November 15, 2023. The jury found Roman Petrov guilty on all counts, including all 27 charges of human trafficking, all 27 charges of kidnapping, and multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and identity theft. They also found Marcus Brennan, Viktor Sokolov, Dmitry Kozlov, and Irina Volkov guilty on various trafficking and conspiracy charges based on their roles in the operation. The courtroom erupted in emotion when the verdicts were read, with victims and family members crying in relief that justice had been served. Petrov remained impassive, showing no reaction even as his attorney announced they would appeal. Sentencing hearings took place throughout December 2023. Judge Margaret Chen heard victim impact statements from multiple women whose lives had been destroyed by the trafficking operation. Sofia Martinez addressed the court again, describing the ongoing PTSD, the nightmares, the inability to trust people, the difficulty maintaining relationships or employment because of constant anxiety. She explained how the experience had shattered her faith in human goodness and left her feeling permanently damaged. But she also expressed determination to prevent other women from experiencing similar trauma, stating that she wanted her story to serve as warning and education for potential victims. Carmen Martinez described the financial burden of Sofia's medical care and therapy, the emotional toll on their entire family, and her own guilt for not somehow preventing what happened to her daughter, despite having no way to know the truth about Alexander Westbrook. Judge Chen, known for stern sentencing in trafficking cases, delivered a scathing condemnation of Petrov's crimes during the sentencing hearing. She described his actions as calculated predation of the most despicable kind, exploiting women's desire for love and connection to destroy their lives for profit. She noted that Petrov had shown absolutely no remorse, no acceptance of responsibility, no acknowledgement of the suffering he had caused. She stated that his crimes had destroyed 27 women's lives directly and caused immeasurable harm to their families and communities. Based on federal sentencing guidelines and the aggravating factors of the case, Judge Chen sentenced Roman Petrov to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, plus an additional 420 years for the multiple counts to be served consecutively. She also ordered $4.2 million in restitution to be paid to victims, though she acknowledged this money would likely never be recovered since most trafficking proceeds had been spent or hidden in untraceable cryptocurrency accounts. The forfeiture of $2.7 million in identified criminal proceeds was also ordered, with funds to be distributed among victims. Marcus Brennan, because of his cooperation agreement and testimony against Petrov, received a reduced sentence of 35 years in federal prison. Viktor Sokolov and Dmitry Kozlov, who had provided information but played more direct roles in kidnapping and guarding victims, each received 25 years. Irina Volkov, whose role was primarily as a guard, but who had been particularly cruel to victims according to testimony, received 15 years. All defendants were ordered to pay portions of the restitution, though the practical reality was that most would never have sufficient assets to make meaningful payments. The Federal Bureau of Prisons designated Petrov to United States Penitentiary, Florence ADX, the nation's most secure maximum security facility, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, where he would spend the rest of his life in virtual isolation with limited human contact and no possibility of release. In addition to criminal prosecution, civil lawsuits were filed by victims against multiple parties. Sofia Martinez and other victims sued the dating app Elite Match for failing to adequately screen users and allowing known predators to create fake profiles. They sued Chapel of Eternal Vows for not verifying identities during marriage ceremonies and for allowing fraudulent marriages to be conducted. They attempted to sue various shell companies involved in money laundering, though these entities had no significant assets to collect. Most of these civil cases settled out of court for undisclosed amounts, with dating platforms agreeing to implement enhanced verification procedures and marriage venues agreeing to more thorough identity checks. The settlements provided some financial compensation to victims, though no amount of money could truly compensate for the trauma they had endured. By January 2024, 6 months after her rescue, Sofia Martinez was slowly rebuilding her life in ways both small and significant. She could not return to her job as a dental receptionist because the workplace environment triggered anxiety attacks, but she enrolled in online college courses to finish her bachelor's degree in psychology with the goal of eventually helping other trafficking survivors. She moved into a new apartment at 2940 Copper Ridge Drive with her mother's help, choosing a different neighborhood to avoid memories associated with her previous life. She continued intensive therapy and attended a support group for trafficking survivors that met weekly in Phoenix. The group had been specifically formed for victims of the Petrov operation, but expanded to include other trafficking survivors, creating a community of women who understood trauma in ways the outside world could not. Sofia's recovery was neither linear nor easy. She had good days when she felt strong and hopeful, and terrible days when she could not leave her apartment because panic attacks made her feel like she was suffocating. She struggled with trust issues that made any new relationship impossible. When men expressed romantic interest, she immediately saw manipulation and predation even when none existed. Simple things that most people took for granted, like going to the grocery store alone or attending social events, required enormous effort and courage. Holidays were particularly difficult because they reminded her of the future she had imagined with Alexander, the future that had been a lie designed to destroy her. But gradually, slowly, she found moments of genuine joy and peace. She reconnected with her best friend, Natalie Chen, who had been devastated by guilt for encouraging Sofia to pursue the relationship with Alexander. Their friendship was rebuilt on a foundation of mutual understanding that neither of them could have predicted what happened. Carmen Martinez's advocacy work expanded significantly in the months following the trial. She founded a non-profit organization called the Truth in Romance Foundation, dedicated to educating people about romance scam warning signs and providing support services for trafficking survivors. The foundation developed educational materials distributed to schools, community centers, and religious organizations across Arizona and eventually nationally. Carmen spoke at dozens of events sharing Sofia's story with permission, always emphasizing that trafficking victims were not naive or stupid, but were targeted by sophisticated criminals who studied psychology and manipulation. The Foundation's website featured red flag indicators that people could use to evaluate whether their romantic relationships might be scams, including warning signs like rushed timelines, requests to keep relationships secret from family, partners who discourage contact with friends, financial requests or unusual control over money, reluctance to meet in public places or introduce you to their family, and inconsistencies in their stories or background information. Rachel Kim became a spokesperson for Shared Hope International, a leading anti-trafficking organization, and traveled nationwide speaking to college students about trafficking awareness. She emphasized that trafficking did not only happen to runaways or drug addicts, but could target educated professional women who made one mistake in trusting the wrong person. Her presentations were powerful because she spoke candidly about her own experience, including the shame and self-blame she felt, making it clear that victims were not at fault for being manipulated by professional predators. Olivia Thornton wrote a memoir titled Sold by Love that became a bestseller, with proceeds funding survivor support services. The book was optioned for film adaptation, bringing even more public attention to romance scam trafficking as a growing threat. By June 2024, 1 year after Sophia's rescue, significant changes had occurred both personally for the survivors and systemically in anti-trafficking efforts. Sophia, Rachel, and Olivia held a private memorial service for the 9 victims from Petrov's operation who remained missing. They placed flowers at the Arizona Capitol Memorial Garden and committed to continuing advocacy until all missing women were found or their fates were known. The FBI maintained active investigations into the 9 missing victims, but acknowledged that recovering them was becoming increasingly unlikely as time passed. Some families held memorial services without bodies, trying to find closure despite the uncertainty. The publicity around the Petrov case led to meaningful systemic changes. The Arizona legislature passed Sophia's Law in April 2024, requiring dating platforms to implement stronger identity verification procedures and mandating law enforcement training on romance scam trafficking indicators. The law increased criminal penalties for trafficking through fraud and deception, and allocated funding for victim services and prevention education. Similar legislation was introduced in other states. The FBI created a romance scam trafficking task force led by Agent Michael Torres, specifically focused on identifying and dismantling operations that used romantic manipulation to traffic victims. The task force coordinated with major dating platforms to develop artificial intelligence systems that could detect suspicious behavior patterns suggesting trafficking recruitment. Dating platforms implemented significant safety improvements following the lawsuits and publicity. Elite Match and other major dating apps now required users to verify their identities through government-issued ID and facial recognition technology before creating profiles. They implemented AI monitoring systems that flagged accounts exhibiting suspicious patterns, such as creating multiple profiles with different names, asking for money early in relationships, pressuring matches to move conversations off-platform quickly, or exhibiting other warning signs consistent with romance scams. Platforms partnered with anti-trafficking organizations to display warning banners, educating users about manipulation tactics and encouraging them to report suspicious behavior. These changes, while not perfect, contributed to a measurable decrease in romance scam trafficking cases in the following years. In May 2024, the FBI announced Operation Heartbreak, a nationwide crackdown on romance scam trafficking rings that had been developed based on intelligence gathered from the Petrov case. The operation resulted in 47 arrests across 12 states, the recovery of 23 victims, and the dismantling of several trafficking networks using methodologies similar to Petrov's operation. The success of Operation Heartbreak demonstrated that the Petrov case had been not just an isolated criminal enterprise, but a symptom of a larger problem requiring coordinated national response. The traffickers arrested in Operation Heartbreak shared common characteristics with Petrov. They were often charming, multilingual, technologically sophisticated criminals who had studied psychology and manipulation tactics specifically to target vulnerable women through online platforms. Sofia Martinez enrolled at Arizona State University in August 2024, pursuing her degree in social work with a specialization in trauma counseling. She received a full scholarship from a trafficking survivor advocacy organization that had been moved by her story. Her goal was to become a licensed clinical social worker, specializing in helping trafficking survivors heal from trauma. The journey through college was challenging, as academic stress triggered anxiety, and some course material about trauma was personally difficult to engage with. But Sofia found purpose in the work, believing that her own experience, as devastating as it had been, gave her unique insight into helping other survivors. She connected with professors conducting research on trafficking recovery and began to see herself not just as a victim, but as someone who could contribute to the larger effort to combat trafficking and support survivors. Carmen Martinez's Truth in Romance Foundation grew to include 15 chapters across the United States by 2025, educating over 500,000 people about romance scam warning signs and contributing to trafficking prevention legislation in 8 states. The Foundation's work was credited with preventing an estimated 200 trafficking attempts through education and early intervention. People who had attended Foundation presentations or visited the website reported suspicious relationships to authorities before they could escalate to trafficking, and several of these reports led to arrests of predators who were targeting new victims. Carmen received awards from multiple anti-trafficking organizations recognizing her advocacy work, but she consistently said the only recognition that mattered was preventing other mothers from experiencing the terror she had felt when Sofia disappeared. Rachel Kim's advocacy work expanded internationally when she was selected to serve on the President's Interagency Task Force to monitor and combat trafficking in persons. In this role, she influenced federal policy on trafficking prevention, prosecution, and survivor support. She also published academic research on trauma recovery for trafficking survivors, contributing to the professional literature that informed treatment approaches. Rachel married in 2026 and had 2 children, finding peace and normalcy after the trauma and demonstrating that survivors could indeed rebuild their lives even after devastating experiences. Olivia Thornton's memoir, Sold by Love, was translated into 23 languages, and the film adaptation was released in 2027, raising $15 million for anti-trafficking organizations. Olivia was invited to speak at the United Nations about global trafficking issues, using her platform to advocate for international cooperation in combating trafficking networks. 5 years after Sofia's rescue, in June 2028, significant changes had occurred, both for the individual survivors and for broader anti-trafficking efforts. Sofia Martinez, now 29 years old, graduated with her master's degree in social work and began working at a trafficking survivor treatment center in Phoenix. She specialized in complex trauma therapy and trafficking recovery, using her professional training combined with personal experience to help other women heal. She had also become engaged to Christopher Park, a therapist she met through survivor advocacy work. Their relationship developed slowly over 2 years, built on honesty and mutual understanding of trauma. Christopher had been patient with Sofia's trust issues and triggers, supporting her healing without pressuring her, and Sofia had learned that love did not have to be a whirlwind to be real. Carmen Martinez's Truth in Romance Foundation had grown into a national organization with significant impact. The Foundation's educational programs had reached millions of people through school presentations, community workshops, online resources, and social media campaigns. Dating platforms partnered with the Foundation to develop safety features and warning systems. law enforcement agencies used foundation materials to train officers on identifying romance scam trafficking. Most significantly, the Foundation's work had contributed to a 34% decrease in romance scam trafficking cases nationally over 5 years, according to FBI statistics. The organization had also provided direct support services to over 1,000 trafficking survivors, including therapy funding, legal assistance, job training, and housing support. The technology improvements in trafficking prevention had been substantial. Artificial intelligence systems could now identify potential trafficking recruitment patterns on social media and dating platforms with increasing accuracy. Blockchain analysis tools allowed law enforcement to trace cryptocurrency transactions related to trafficking, even through complex laundering schemes. Dark web monitoring by international law enforcement agencies had led to the shutdown of multiple trafficking marketplaces and the arrest of dozens of administrators and buyers. The dark market auction site where Sophia had been listed had been permanently dismantled through a coordinated Interpol operation that resulted in arrests across 6 countries. Roman Petrov remained in Florence ADX maximum security prison, serving his life sentence without possibility of parole. He had filed multiple appeals, all of which were denied at every level of the federal court system. His conviction was affirmed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court declined to hear his petition. Petrov had refused all media interview requests, maintained his lack of remorse, and according to prison reports, showed no signs of rehabilitation or acknowledgement of his crimes. He would die in prison, isolated from human contact, his legacy being the destruction of 27 women's lives and the systemic changes implemented to prevent others from following his path. Marcus Brennan was serving his 35-year sentence at Federal Correctional Institution, Tucson. He had participated in prison education programs and expressed remorse in several prison interviews, claiming he had been corrupted by greed and now understood the devastation his actions had caused. His earliest possible release date was 2053, by which time he would be 78 years old. Viktor Sokolov and Dmitry Kozlov were serving their sentences in separate federal facilities, both maintaining their claims that they had been low-level employees who did not fully understand they were participating in human trafficking. Irina Volkov was released to a halfway house in 2035 after serving 12 years with good behavior, then immediately deported to Ukraine and permanently barred from returning to the United States. Of the 9 women from Petrov's operation who had been missing at the time of his arrest, 4 were eventually located and recovered between 2025 and 2027 through continuing FBI investigations and Interpol cooperation. These women had been trafficked to various international locations and held in situations ranging from forced labor to sexual exploitation. Their recoveries were celebrated as small victories, though the trauma they had endured could never be fully healed. 5 women remained missing, presumed deceased or lost in trafficking networks so deep that even extensive international law enforcement cooperation could not locate them. Their families continued advocacy for missing persons resources and maintained hope for information about their loved ones' fates. On a warm June evening in 2028, 5 years to the day after her rescue, Sofia Martinez sat in the backyard of her mother's house at 4821 Desert Rose Lane with Carmen, Diego, Christopher, Natalie, Rachel, and Olivia. They were celebrating multiple things: Sophia's graduation with her master's degree, her new job at the Trafficking Survivor Treatment Center, her engagement to Christopher, and most importantly, 5 years of survival and healing. Sophia looked around at the people she loved and felt gratitude for the second chance at life she had been given. The Sophia who had swiped right on Alexander Westbrook's dating profile 5 years ago seemed like a different person, naive and trusting in ways that now felt impossible. But that woman had not been stupid or weak. She had been targeted by a professional predator who specialized in exploiting human needs for love and connection. Sophia thought about the journey from victim to survivor to advocate, about how she had transformed her trauma into purpose by helping other women heal from similar experiences. She acknowledged that her healing was ongoing and probably would never be complete. She still had nightmares sometimes, still struggled with trust, still felt anxiety in situations that reminded her of those 6 days in captivity. But she had also found strength she never knew she possessed, had learned that survival was an active choice made every day, and had discovered that speaking truth about her experience could prevent others from suffering similar fates. As the sun set over Phoenix and her loved ones laughed about something Diego had said, Sophia felt a moment of genuine peace. She was here. She was alive. She was surrounded by people who loved her authentically, and tomorrow she would go to work helping another trafficking survivor begin their own journey toward healing. The documentary of Sophia Martinez's story, which aired nationally in 2028, concluded with statistics and resources for viewers. Romance scam trafficking affected thousands of people annually in the United States, with women aged 20 to 35 being the most common targets, though men were also victimized. The average relationship duration before trafficking occurred was 6 to 12 weeks, just long enough to establish trust, but not long enough for victims to truly know their partner. Warning signs included rushed relationship timelines, isolation from family and friends, partners who discouraged or prevented contact with loved ones, financial requests or unusual control over money, reluctance to meet in public places or to introduce the partner to family, inconsistencies in stories or background information, and pressure to make major life decisions like marriage or relocation very quickly. The documentary emphasized that trafficking victims were not weak or stupid, but were targeted by sophisticated criminals who studied human psychology and manipulation tactics. Or it noted that Sophia's courage in sharing her story had contributed to systemic changes, including improved dating platform safety features, better law enforcement training, stronger anti-trafficking legislation, and increased public awareness. Most importantly, it provided resources for viewers who might be in dangerous situations or who suspected someone they knew was being targeted. The National Human Trafficking Hotline number 1-373-728 was displayed prominently. The Truth in Romance Foundation website, truthinromance.org, was provided for educational resources and survivor support information. The documentary ended with a direct appeal. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, call 911 immediately. Trust your instincts, protect yourself and others, and remember that help is available. Sophia Martinez's story was one of horror and trauma, but also of resilience, survival, and the power of advocacy to create change. She had been targeted, manipulated, and nearly destroyed by a predator who saw her as merchandise. But she had survived, spoken truth about her experience, contributed to the arrest and conviction of her traffickers, and helped create systemic changes that protected other vulnerable people. 5 years after her nightmare began with a swipe on a dating app, Sophia was building a life of purpose and meaning, proving that even the darkest experiences could be transformed into light for others. Her legacy would not be as a victim, but as a survivor who turned trauma into strength and who refused to let her suffering be meaningless. And somewhere across the country, women who had heard her story and recognized warning signs in their own relationships made different choices, avoided similar traps, and remained free because Sophia Martinez had been brave enough to share her truth with the world.